The scream cracked the apartment's quiet, and Emily Carr gripped Noah as the door shuddered. Daniel Reed spun back once, eyes lit with fury, then stormed down the hall as sirens threaded the night air. The narrator watched Emily breathe through panic, count to 3, and steady her arms around the child. Emily said, "No one will hurt you again." Daniel's footsteps faded, but the echo of slammed wood clung to the walls like smoke. The narrator tracked a broken picture frame that showed a beach, now split by spidered glass. Noah said, "Is he coming back?" Emily said, "Not tonight." The sirens swelled, then shrank, as if unsure where to land. The narrator felt the room tilt from shock to resolve. Emily said, "We start over now." The apartment held its breath as Emily moved from room to room, matching the rhythm of distant sirens with measured steps. The narrator watched her collect documents, slide them into a folder, and note each detail like a ledger of survival. Emily said, "We keep proof, we keep calm." She took photos of scuffs on the door and the broken frame, as if capturing a map of harm. Noah said, "Can we sleep now?" Emily said, "Soon, my brave star." She checked locks twice, then 3 times, and set a chair under the knob like a sentinel in cheap wood. The narrator tracked the steadying of her hands, the return of breath, the rise of resolve. Dawn peeled a thin gray edge across the blinds, and Emily packed a go-bag with the precision of a field nurse. The narrator followed the toothbrush, the small shoes, the birth certificate that felt heavier than it should. Emily said, "We take only what matters." She folded a spare sweater that still smelled of soap and summer. Noah said, "Do we need the beach picture?" Emily said, "We need new pictures." She zipped the bag and stood very still, listening for steps that did not come. The narrator measured the weight of the bag and the lighter pull in her chest as choice became motion. By 8, Emily sat across a polished desk that reflected her eyes like twin moons. The narrator described the clipped hum of an air purifier and the calm tap of keys as a paralegal typed. Emily said, "I need a restraining order and custody protection." The attorney, Harper Lane, leaned forward with the look of someone who counts time in filings and hearings. Harper said, "Document everything, and we file today." Emily slid photos and notes across, each image a shard that cut but also cleared. The narrator felt the room reshape around the plan, edges of fear swapped for lines of action. Afternoon returned them home to a silence that no longer felt like a trap. The narrator traced new habits forming as Emily labeled a folder and saved copies to a cloud like a lighthouse built from data. Emily said, "We are not alone anymore." She left a message for Maya Lopez, asking for a ride tomorrow, and set an alarm for the hearing. Noah said, "Can we have cocoa?" Emily said, "Yes, with extra marshmallows." The kettle sang, and for a breath the day felt almost ordinary. The narrator held that note, small and bright, in a palm of cracked porcelain hope. Emily's alarm pierced the dark, and she rose before the city stirred. The narrator followed her hands as they tightened shoelaces and buttoned her jacket with a rhythm she learned from necessity. She kissed Noah's forehead, whispering, "I'll be back before bedtime." The factory floor swallowed her, steel clanging against steel, fluorescent lights buzzing like relentless bees. Emily said, "One more shift, one more bill." Her back ached, but her resolve grew. The narrator traced the clock's slow crawl, the echo of tired footsteps, and the faint smile she forced when coworkers joked. Every hour weighed heavy, yet she carried it because love demanded it. The kitchen table became her battlefield at night. Emily spread receipts and bills, her pen scratching circles around numbers that never balanced. The narrator noted the quiet hum of the fridge and the tick of a clock mocking her. Emily said, "Rent first, groceries next." Noah leaned against her arm, tracing lines on paper like mazes. He said, "Will there be enough for cocoa?" Emily smiled faintly. "Always." She tallied overtime hours, each one a lifeline stretched too thin. The narrator observed how her tired eyes sharpened when she thought of losing the roof above them. She would not let cracks consume them. The phone buzzed and Emily's face softened when she heard Maya Lopez's voice. Maya said, "You're stronger than you think." Emily answered, "I'm just tired." The narrator held the pause where silence bridged comfort and exhaustion. Maya said, "Don't let fear run you. Fight." Emily closed her eyes, letting the words seep into her bones. The apartment was still, except for the hum of distant traffic. Noah watched cartoons muted, his glance darting toward her, waiting for proof she would not falter. The narrator sensed her decision hardening, not from courage alone, but from the echo of friendship carrying her forward. Morning drizzle dampened the sidewalk as Emily guided Noah toward school. Her umbrella tilted against the wind, shoes splashing through puddles. The narrator described her hand steady on Noah's backpack strap, keeping him close. Children's laughter carried across the gate, mingling with whispers between parents. Emily said, "Have a good day, champ." Noah said, "Promise you'll be here later." Emily smiled thinly, "Always." The narrator caught her glance at the other parents, their eyes weighing her story without knowing it. She kissed Noah's cheek, letting him run forward while her heart stayed tethered at the gate. The knock of the courier jolted her, and an envelope slid into her hands heavier than paper should be. The narrator tracked her breath hitch as she slid it open. Legal filings sprawled like a storm across the pages. Emily said, "He's fighting for custody." The room tilted, silence loud enough to choke. Noah peeked from the hallway, clutching his toy. Emily pressed the folder to her chest, eyes glassy but fierce. She said, "Well, fight back." The narrator measured the moment when despair tried to dig claws, but determination rooted deeper, stronger, unyielding. The courthouse hallway smelled of waxed floors and coffee, echoing with hurried footsteps. Emily Carter stood with files pressed to her chest, her pulse racing. The narrator traced the sweat at her hairline and the way her jaw clenched when Daniel Reed passed, smirking as though victory was already his. Daniel said, "You'll never win." Emily whispered, "We'll see." Lawyers shuffled papers, doors creaked, and a clerk called names like clockwork. The narrator caught the storm behind Emily's eyes, not rage but steady fire. She exhaled through her teeth, promising herself that Noah would never feel abandoned again. The office buzzed louder than usual, whispers swelling as Emily returned from court. She sat at her desk, screens glowing with emails she could barely focus on. Her manager's shadow lingered too long, his tone sharp. "We need commitment, Emily." The narrator sensed her spine stiffen though her stomach twisted. She said, "I am committed." The walls seemed to close in, the air thinner. Colleagues glanced away, sympathetic yet distant. The narrator saw how her battle at home now seeped into her livelihood, making every keystroke feel like walking on glass. She pressed her lips shut, choosing silence over collapse. Evening light fell through blinds as Maya Lopez arrived with takeout, her smile softer than her words. Maya said, "You didn't tell me about the papers." Emily replied, "I thought I could handle it alone." The narrator traced the silence where trust faltered. Maya said, "Don't shut me out now." Emily's hands trembled as she opened the containers, her appetite lost. The narrator saw betrayal bloom, not from Maya but from a truth Emily hadn't shared. Her friend had known Daniel's lawyer once. The weight of secrets pressed between them, heavier than the food left untouched on the table. The knock at the door rattled her chest. A social worker stood with clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the apartment like it was evidence. Emily said, "Please come in." Noah hovered, clutching his plush gaze wary. The narrator followed the worker's pen as it scribbled, marking unseen judgments into ink. The questions came sharp: routines, meals, bedtime. Emily answered with clipped calm, her voice steady even as shame flickered in her eyes. The narrator measured the tension. A home turned into a stage where every stain and scuff became a verdict waiting to be cast. Night settled heavy, and Emily sat at the table with unpaid bills fanned like weapons. The narrator tracked the strain in her shoulders, the dark circles deepening under her eyes. She whispered, "How much longer can I hold this?" Noah peeked from his room, voice small. "Mom, Are you okay? She forced a smile. Yes, go back to bed. The narrator felt the words hang brittle in the air. A lie told only to protect him. She buried her face in her hands, inhaled deep and exhaled harder. The fight was bleeding her dry, but surrender was not an option. The betrayal cracked open like glass under weight. Emily Carter sat across from Maya Lopez, whose eyes dodged hers. The narrator caught Emily's voice, steady but cold. You knew Daniel's lawyer. Maya's lips parted, but no defense came. Emily's breath hitched, grief tangled with fury. She said, "You let me fight blind." Silence swelled, only the hum of the refrigerator filling the void. Maya said, "I didn't want to make things worse." The narrator lingered on the fracture between them, a friendship unraveling thread by thread. Emily rose, folder clutched like armor, and turned away before tears betrayed her. Old wounds surfaced with cruel timing. Emily sifted through boxes in her closet, searching for Noah's school papers, only to find a stack of letters from her estranged mother. The narrator described her trembling hands as she whispered, "Why now?" The envelope smelled faintly of dust and regret. Emily pressed one open, her mother's apology etched in uneven ink, reminding her of childhood scars not yet healed. Noah patted in, asking, "Are those from Grandma?" Emily said, "Yes, but they're complicated." The narrator weighed the heaviness of legacy colliding with present battles, her pain folding into new strength. The custody hearing resumed, and Daniel Reed's lies filled the air like smoke. He painted himself as the stable parent, his words dripping with practiced charm. The narrator tracked Emily's knuckles whitening against her folder. Her lawyer whispered, "Stay calm." Daniel said, "She's unstable, Your Honor." Emily inhaled, her heart roaring, but her voice stayed quiet. She whispered, "I'll let the truth speak." The courtroom air thickened, each claim twisting like a blade. The narrator noted the weight of silence, her resolve sharpening like steel beneath the surface. This was war without weapons, and she refused to yield. At Noah's school, voices rose over a scraped knee-turned spectacle. Another parent sneered, "Maybe if his home were stable." Emily's face flushed crimson as she knelt, wiping dirt from Noah's palms. She said, "He's fine, thank you." The narrator caught her eyes scanning the crowd, whispers pricking like needles. Noah whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" Emily said, "Never. You did nothing wrong." The tension coiled around her like a vice, a battle fought in the court of public opinion. The narrator held the weight of unspoken judgment and the quiet armor Emily wrapped around her child. That night, exhaustion pressed her into the couch, but the narrator traced the fire sparking back into her veins. She whispered, "I will not break." Tears streamed, not of defeat but of anger sharpened into resolve. She gripped her pen and scrawled notes across the margins of affidavits, each word carved like a blade against despair. Noah slept nearby, his small breath anchoring her. The narrator felt her spirit nearly snap yet rebuild stronger, a steel forged in fire. Emily said, "For you, I will fight until nothing is left." The storm outside rattled the windows, echoing her vow. The doorbell rang like thunder in the silence, and Emily Carter opened it to find her estranged brother, Marcus Carter. His presence carved open years of distance. He said, "I couldn't stay away any longer." Emily's voice trembled. "Why now?" The narrator traced the air thick with unspoken apologies, the past pressing against the walls. Marcus said, "Because he can't win alone." Noah peeked from behind the couch, wide-eyed at the stranger. The narrator described the shock mixing with fragile hope in Emily's face, a new piece of the battle sliding into place. Her heart ached, but her guard held firm. Emily sat across from Marcus at the kitchen table, the air heavy with tension. He slid documents across, his eyes steady. Marcus said, "I have proof of Daniel's past." Emily whispered, "You've been watching." The narrator captured the sting of betrayal clashing with the relief of unexpected help. "Ah." Marcus said, "I stayed away, but I never stopped looking out for you." Emily's hands hovered above the papers, unsure whether to accept or reject them. The narrator felt the moment tremble between forgiveness and fury, the cost of trust weighing against the chance of survival. Emily unfolded the records Marcus had brought, police reports and financial slips that painted Daniel's polished mask in cracks. Her breath caught as the truth screamed from ink. The narrator traced her trembling fingers, skimming pages she had long feared existed. Emily whispered, "This changes everything." Marcus nodded, his silence weighted with regret. The narrator measured the power of evidence against the pain of its arrival, like a torch that burned even as it lit the path. Noah asked softly, "Does this mean we're safe?" Emily pulled him close and whispered, "Not yet, but closer." Trust was fragile, but Emily began working with Marcus, piecing together a strategy. The narrator watched them side by side, voices low, scribbling notes late into the night. Emily said, "We have to stay 2 steps ahead." Marcus replied, "We will." Their shared silence spoke louder than words, carrying years of broken ties and the slow stitching of fragile hope. The narrator felt the rhythm of reconciliation building, not from forgiveness alone, but from necessity. Noah slept on the couch nearby, his presence grounding them both in purpose. Emily whispered, "For him, we fight together." By dawn, Emily stood taller, holding the folder of evidence like a sword. The narrator described her gaze sharpened with resolve, no longer just reacting but preparing to strike back. She whispered, "He doesn't get to define us." Marcus said, "Then let's end this." The narrator captured the moment as fragile reconciliation fused into alliance. Noah rubbed his eyes and smiled faintly, sensing a shift though he didn't understand it fully. Emily kissed his hair and said, "We're closer to being free." The weight of fear lifted slightly, replaced by a fragile but fierce determination. The courtroom brimmed with tension as Emily Carter stepped forward, folder in hand. The narrator described her heart hammering, yet her voice calm as she answered the judge's questions. Daniel Ride sat across, his smirk rehearsed, his lawyer confident. Emily whispered to herself, "For Noah, I will not falter." The judge's gavel tapped for order as voices clashed. The narrator lingered on her resolve, the moment a battlefield with words sharper than swords. Every eye in the room felt like a weight, yet she stood unshaken. Noah's future was being written in every sentence spoken here. Cross-examination sliced through Daniel's testimony like a blade. The narrator caught his polished facade cracking when Emily's lawyer produced records Marcus uncovered. Daniel barked, "That's a lie." The judge warned, "Control yourself." Emily exhaled, her chest loosening as the truth began to surface. The narrator measured the cost. Every revelation meant reopening wounds, yet each word steadied her ground. The courtroom buzzed, whispers spilling like ripples in water. Emily's eyes flicked to Noah's drawing tucked in her folder, a silent anchor. She whispered, "We were almost there." The hardest moment came when Emily was asked about her past mistakes. The narrator followed the flush on her cheeks as she admitted moments of fear, exhaustion, and breaking down. She whispered, "But I never stopped fighting for him." Tears edged her eyes, yet she stood taller with each word. Daniel smirked, thinking victory, but the judge leaned forward, moved by the raw truth. The narrator lingered on the courage it took to bleed honesty in a room designed for judgment. Emily's shame no longer bound her, it became her weapon. Her voice carried like a vow reborn. Marcus Carter rose unexpectedly, the judge allowing him to speak as a character witness. The narrator traced his words, heavy with regret, but clear in loyalty. Marcus said, "She protects Noah with everything she has, even when she had nothing." Emily's breath shook, hearing truth from a voice she had once despised. Daniel's lawyer objected, but the judge waved it aside. The narrator measured how years of estrangement bent into this fragile moment of redemption. Emily's eyes glistened, her walls softening just enough to let hope in. For the first time she wasn't standing alone. Closing arguments echoed like thunder. Emily's lawyer painted the picture of sacrifice, love, and unshaken resilience. Daniel's lawyer sputtered, trying to twist shadows into truths. The narrator described the gavel's echo silencing both sides, leaving only the hum of anticipation. Emily whispered, "Whatever happens, he'll know I fought." The weight of weeks and years condensed into this single breath. Marcus rested a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. The narrator lingered on the image of a mother transformed, once broken, now steel. The battle neared its end, but her spirit had already claimed victory. The courtroom held its breath as the judge returned, and Emily Carter felt time thin to a wire. The narrator tracked her fingers pressed to the folder, knuckles white but steady. The judge spoke, measured and clear. Harper Lane said, "Whatever comes, we stand." Daniel Reed stared ahead, jaw locked. Emily said, "For Noah, I listen." The words landed like stones in a river, then settled into one current. The judge granted primary custody to Emily, with structured visitation. The narrator felt the room exhale. Daniel said, "This isn't over." Emily said, "It is for him." The gavel fell, and silence bloomed into a future. The hallway outside buzzed with muted voices, and relief stung like cold air. The narrator watched Harper Lane shake Emily's hand with a small nod. Harper said, "File the orders, rest tonight." Marcus Carter stepped close, eyes damp. Marcus said, "You did it." Emily said, "We did it." Daniel passed with his lawyer, a storm contained in a suit. He said, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Emily met his gaze, letting the look end the argument. She turned to the clerk's desk, signed the copies, and tucked them away. The narrator counted each breath as a step towards steadier ground. Morning returned like a gentler tide. The narrator followed Emily as she brewed coffee and packed Noah's lunch with unhurried hands. Noah said, "Did we win?" Emily said, "We're safe." The words were soft but solid, like a key turning. She pinned the schedule to the fridge, colored blocks marking school, visits, and quiet time. Marcus said, "Call me if anything shifts." Emily smiled, lighter than yesterday. She walked Noah to the door, tied his laces, and kissed his hair. The narrator felt routine mend what fear had frayed. The day opened, not wide, but enough to walk through. Evening painted the apartment in amber, and quiet felt earned. The narrator watched Emily sort a small box of old letters, then set them aside without flinching. She opened a new notebook and wrote 3 lines about hope, work, and rest. Noah said, "Can we read before bed?" Emily said, 2 chapters. Laughter moved through rooms that once held only sirens and whispers. The window showed a city still restless, but their corner had softened. The narrator felt the center of the home shift back to warmth. The night promised nothing grand, only peace made by hand. The last light faded as Emily paused at Noah's door, palm resting on the wood like a quiet oath. The narrator lingered on her face, easing into a real smile. She sat beside him and listened to his breathing even out. Emily said, "We're stronger now." She watched the shadows settle into harmless shapes. A future waited, uncertain but hers to shape. Marcus texted, "You're not alone," and she let the truth land. The narrator saw the past unclench its grip. Emily whispered, "We never stop fighting, but we also live." The night held, and so did she.